The wilderness. The term itself brings forth images of lostness and wandering, despair. But that doesn't have to be the case. The children of Israel first crossed the desert, journeying from Egypt, where they'd been slaves for many generations, to a land promised them by God. That was more than 3,200 years ago. For them, the desert was a place of wandering and lostness. But because their leader Moses recorded their journey in that wonderful book called the Bible, we're now able to learn God's plan for our life, His plan for spiritual maturity. You know, we're all on a journey from the place of bondage, life lived without God, to a place called spiritual maturity. Let's learn from those ancient pilgrims. By the time we finish this journey, each one of us should be experiencing some degree of spiritual maturity, knowing God, loving God, and accepting His love for us. In 12 sessions, we're going to follow the footsteps of Moses and his band of Israelites from the eastern shore of the Yam Suf, the legendary Red Sea, to the borders of Canaan, which is still occupied today by the Israelis. That journey took the Israelis 40 years. Will not take that long. But I believe that as we cross that desert and learn some lessons from God, we too can experience spiritual maturity and find power for living. In my brief visits with you each week, I'm going to take you to some remote place in the Sinai where the children of Israel learn some particular significant lesson about God and about life. I had with me, when I made my trips, a small group of friends. We traveled by jeep to each location. I stopped, we got out, taught. You're going to get to listen in, learning some significant lesson first taught by God. The first stop on the journey to spiritual maturity is, of all things, a potty stop. Following their miraculous deliverance from the Red Sea, the Israelites moved rapidly towards the land of Canaan. But then God said, don't follow the shore of the Mediterranean. Instead of going directly to Canaan, go south, which is in the opposite direction along the eastern shore of the Gulf of Suez. For 3 days they traveled till their water ran out. Their throats were parched, they were dying of thirst, and then they spotted ahead a marvelous oasis. So come now with me to Marah and listen with me as I share this first significant lesson to be learned in the journey towards spiritual maturity. Now, the very first place the children of Israel stopped when they came out of Egypt was at these pools of Marah. Actually, the word itself means bitter, but they didn't know it was bitter. They'd gone for 3 days without anything to drink. Their throats were parched. And suddenly ahead they saw this marvelous oasis with these palm trees and rocks, and they came rushing toward it with all of their cattle, yearning to get something to drink. And then when they knelt down to taste the water, they found out that it was laced with magnesium and calcium, was impossible to drink, too bitter. And they grumbled and they complained against Moses. Moses went through a little procedure of grabbing hold of a bush and throwing it into the water, causing the chemicals to precipitate to the bottom so that the water could be sweet. But the whole thing brings up a question. Did God know that this water was bitter? Did God know ahead of time what lay ahead for those children of Israel? For 3 days they had gone without any kind of water, and suddenly they come to the pools and they can't drink it? Is God in charge of our lives? I guess you're like me. I've had a lot of experiences like this. When I've come rushing toward a beautiful pool, it looks delicious, only to taste it and find out that I can't drink it. And it raises the question, does God know what's going on in my life? There's an old Bible scholar who said,
a long time ago that God was not only interested in getting the children of Israel out of Egypt, but he was also interested in getting Egypt out of the children of Israel. Egypt was a dirty place. They had been through plagues, a number of them. They had just left Egypt with a number of the children, hundreds of thousands of children who had died, left behind. They had come out of that place of frogs and flies and locusts and boils. And here they are in the desert of Sinai, where we are right now. How was God going to clean their system? Well, it looked like the best way to clean their system was to bring them to a place like this and to have them drink the water. Again, the water is filled with magnesium, and it's filled with calcium. You can't see it, but as it dries on my hands, I can feel it. It's oily, and if it dries completely, there'll be dust left on my hands, the dust of magnesium, the very chemical that we use today to clean our systems out. It looked like God did have a purpose, after all, in bringing the children of Israel to these waters of Marah. I've had to drink a lot of bitter things in my life, drink from the bitter cup. Nobody likes to do it. It's the same kind of cup that Jesus had to drink from when he went to the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed, "Lord, if it be thy will, let not this cup pass from me." And yet, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. God has a lot of bitter water that he wants us to drink, but he's got a purpose behind that bitter water. We may not understand it, and our friends may not understand it, but God has a real purpose for it. This water here at Marah contains these chemicals, interesting composition called dolomite, mixture of calcium and magnesium, but it's the same kind of chemical that doctors give athletes today to keep their heart muscles regulated, to keep the muscles in their body regulated in the hot sun. God not only wanted to clean out the systems of these Israelites, but he wanted to make them strong and healthy. And because he had a purpose for them, he was going to change their appetites. He was going to put them on kosher food. He was going to teach them how to eat, going to teach them how to walk, going to teach them how to live. God wanted those children of Israel to live long lives. They failed. But we don't have to fail. If we'll drink the bitter water that God has for us, we'll live long, creative, productive lives to the glory of God.